I pushed my old Ford Ranger up the winding mountain road, wincing each time the undercarriage scraped against the rutted dirt path. The truck protested with each mile, overloaded with supplies meant to last me the entire summer season. My boxes of canned food, books, clothes, and equipment filled every available space, leaving just enough room for me to see out the rearview mirror. The Cascade Mountains of Oregon stretched out around me, a sea of pine-covered slopes under a cloudy June sky. 3 months of total isolation lay ahead, exactly what I needed after Sarah walked out of our apartment in my life 6 weeks ago. No cell service, no internet, no neighbors, just me, the trees, and whatever emotional baggage I hadn't managed to leave behind in Portland. The GPS had died 20 minutes back when I lost signal, but the Forest Service directions were clear enough. One final turn revealed a small clearing where a weathered pickup truck sat parked beside a trail marker. Beyond it rose my home for the summer, a wooden tower perched atop stilts that lifted it above the surrounding trees, giving it an unobstructed view of the forest in all directions. I pulled up alongside the other vehicle and cut my engine. The silence hit me immediately. No traffic noise, no people, just the whisper of wind through pine needles and distant birdsong. I stepped out, stretching my back after the 4-hour drive, when the door of the other truck opened. Miller. The man who emerged looked to be in his mid-50s, with a sun-weathered face and a salt and pepper beard trimmed short. He wore a standard Forest Service uniform, the green fabric faded from years of washing. Yeah, David Miller. I extended my hand. You must be Tom. Tom Anderson's handshake was firm and calloused. Station supervisor. Good timing. Weather report says we might get rain tonight. He glanced at my overloaded truck. Let's get your gear up before it hits. We spent the next hour hauling my supplies up the wooden staircase that wound around the tower's central support. 87 steps. I counted them all, pausing every 20 or so to catch my breath in the thin mountain air. Tom moved with the efficiency of someone who'd done this dozens of times, barely breaking a sweat despite carrying some of my heavier boxes. The tower itself was smaller than I'd expected. A single room about 20 feet square with windows on all sides sitting atop the platform. The sparse furnishings included a narrow bed built into one wall, a small kitchen area with a propane stove, a desk with radio equipment, and a circular map table in the center topped with a fire finder, a sighting device used to pinpoint the exact location of smoke or flames. Bathroom's the outhouse down the path, Tom said, setting down my box of kitchen supplies. Shower's the bag hanging on the east side, gets decent sun in the mornings. I nodded, trying to picture my daily routine in this tiny space while Tom continued his matter-of-fact orientation. Generators for emergencies only. Solar panels handle your basic power needs. Water barrel on the north side catches rain, but I filled it yesterday. Should last 2 weeks if you're careful. Tom moved to the desk, pointing out the radio equipment. Standard check-ins at 8 and 8, morning and night. Channel 3 for regular reports, Channel 1 for emergencies only. Log everything. Weather changes, smoke sightings, aircraft overhead, even if it seems trivial. I took it all in, noting the worn but clean condition of everything. The floor had been recently swept, the windows clear enough to offer stunning panoramic views of the forest below. Miles of green stretched in every direction, broken only by the occasional rocky outcropping or the silver ribbon of a distant river. District maps here, Tom said, unfolding a large topographical chart across the map table. Your Tower 4. Nearest road access is where we parked. Closest town is Oak Ridge, about 40 miles southwest. His finger traced along various markers. These are the other towers, but you're the only one manned in this sector this season. Budget cuts. So I'm completely alone out here? I asked, feeling both a twist of anxiety and relief at the confirmation. Tom nodded. That's the job. Just you and the trees. He continued the orientation, showing me how to use the fire finder, explaining the weather instruments and walking through emergency protocols. As the afternoon wore on, we stored my supplies and Tom explained the rhythm of lookout life. The daily logs, the constant scanning for smoke, the importance of maintaining radio contact. The work itself sounded straightforward, almost boring, which suited me fine. I needed boring after the emotional hurricane of the past few months. "Any questions so far?" Tom asked as the daylight began to fade. "I think I'm good. Seems pretty straightforward." Tom checked his watch. "Need to head out before dark. Road gets tricky after sunset." He zipped up his jacket and reached into an inner pocket. "One more thing." What he placed on the desk made my stomach drop. A pistol, black, compact, and unmistakably loaded with a magazine inserted. "What's that for?" I asked, staring at the weapon. "Protection." Tom's voice had changed, losing its administrative tone. "From what? Bears?" I tried to keep my voice casual, but something in Tom's expression made the hair on my arms stand up. He looked at me directly, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Not bears. Not wolves. Not anything you'd expect." He tapped the gun with one finger. "It's a Glock 9mm. Safety's here. It's loaded but not chambered. You need to use it. Rack the slide first." I glanced between the gun and Tom's face, waiting for more explanation, but he volunteered nothing. "Look," I said, "I appreciate the concern, but I've never even fired a handgun, and you're being pretty vague about why I need one." Tom sighed, looking out the window at the darkening forest. "There are things in these woods. Things I can't really explain, and you wouldn't believe me if I tried. Try me." I crossed my arms. He shook his head. "Better you see for yourself. Maybe nothing will happen. Some seasons are quiet." He turned back to me. "But if you hear voices in the night, especially voices that sound familiar, don't go investigating. Use the radio. Call me first." My mind raced with questions, but Tom's expression had closed off. He checked his watch again. "I need to go. Radio check at 8 tomorrow morning." "You can't just leave me with a cryptic warning and a gun," I protested, following him to the door. "Keep it locked at night," was all he said, starting down the stairs. "And David, stay in the tower after dark, no matter what you hear." I stood at the railing watching as Tom descended. "What about wildlife? Actual bears or mountain lions?" "Make noise, they'll avoid you," he called up without looking back. "But that's not what the gun's for." I watched as he crossed to his truck, started the engine, and began to pull away. Just before he disappeared down the access road, he stuck his arm out the window in a final wave, and then he was gone, leaving me alone on the observation deck. Below me, the forest stretched quiet and seemingly peaceful in every direction, already filling with shadows as the sun dipped behind the western peaks. I went back inside, closing and locking the door behind me. The pistol sat on the desk where Tom had left it, an unwelcome presence in my new home. I ran my fingers through my hair, wondering what exactly I'd gotten myself into. The job description had mentioned isolation, weather tracking, and fire spotting. Nothing about mysterious dangers lurking in the woods. I picked up the gun, feeling its weight, before setting it back down. What was out there that had the gruff, no-nonsense Tom spooked enough to arm a complete novice? And what did he mean about hearing familiar voices? As darkness settled over the forest, I unpacked the last of my supplies, trying to focus on organizing my small living space rather than dwelling on Tom's warning. But my eyes kept drifting to the windows, searching the black wall of trees below, wondering what exactly was hiding among them. Darkness fell quickly in the mountains. As the last light faded from the sky, I found myself truly alone for the first time since arriving at the tower. Tom's truck had long disappeared down the winding road, leaving nothing but the soft whisper of wind through the pines and my own thoughts for company. I unpacked the last of my supplies, organizing canned food on the small shelves and stowing my clothes in the narrow cabinet beside the bed. The routine tasks helped keep my mind off Tom's cryptic warning and the gun that now sat on the desk beside the radio equipment. The tower felt different at night. What had seemed cozy in daylight now felt exposed, with darkness pressing against the windows from all sides. I drew the threadbare curtains, not for privacy, since there was no one for miles to see in, but to block the sensation of being surrounded by an endless void. I clicked on the battery-powered lamp and consulted the station manual Tom had left behind. 8 o'clock check-in wasn't required on my first night, but I figured I should familiarize myself with the equipment anyway. The radio was older than I expected, with analog dials and a handset connected by a coiled cord. I tested it briefly, speaking my call sign into the void, but received only empty static in return. After a simple dinner of canned soup heated on the propane stove, I settled into what would become my nightly routine. The manual outlined hourly scans of the surrounding forest, systematic sweeps with binoculars from each of the 4 observation windows, looking for any sign of smoke or flame. Even at night, fires could be spotted by their glow against the darkness. I started my first official scan at 10, working clockwise around the tower, carefully examining each section of forest visible through the glass. The moon was nearly full, casting a silver light over the landscape that made the task easier than I'd expected. My thoughts drifted as I worked. The silence was absolute in a way I'd never experienced before. In Portland, there was always something. Traffic, neighbors, the hum of appliances. Here, when I held my breath, I could hear nothing but the occasional creak of the tower adjusting to the cooling night air. I thought about Sarah, wondering if she'd tried to call my disconnected cell phone, if she regretted walking out, if she missed me at all. 6 weeks hadn't dulled the ache of her absence, though I'd gotten better at pushing the thoughts away when they surfaced. The midnight scan started like the others. I'd just finished the southern quadrant and was swinging my binoculars northeast when something caught my eye. A faint, yellowish light flickering among the trees about 2 miles away. I paused, adjusting the focus. The light seemed to be coming from Tower 7, which according to Tom's orientation was supposed to be unmanned this season. I watched for several minutes as the light blinked irregularly, sometimes bright, sometimes fading almost to nothing. I consulted the district map spread across the central table. Tower 7 was clearly marked, sitting atop a ridge that would give it a similar vantage point to my own position. The 2 towers were connected by a trail that looked relatively direct on the map. I picked up the radio handset and turned to channel 3. Tower 4 to Tower 7, do you copy? Over. My voice sounded unnaturally loud in the quiet room. Nothing but static answered me. Tower 4 to Tower 7, I can see lights at your location. Is anyone there? Over. The static continued unbroken. I tried 2 more times before switching to channel 1, the emergency frequency, and repeating my call. The result was the same, just the soft hiss of an empty channel. I returned to the window, training my binoculars on Tower 7 again. The lights continued their strange, pulsing pattern, neither regular enough to be some kind of automated system nor random enough to be a natural phenomenon like reflections from water. It almost looked like someone moving around inside with a lantern or flashlight, the glow appearing at different windows as they walked the perimeter of the tower. But if someone was there, why weren't they answering the radio? I watched for nearly 20 minutes before the lights suddenly went out. One moment they were there, and the next, the distant tower was swallowed by darkness, becoming just another black shape against the night sky. I noted the occurrence in the logbook as Tom had instructed, recording the time, duration, and my failed attempts at radio contact. The mundane act of writing helped settle my nerves, giving me something concrete to focus on. There were logical explanations, I told myself. Perhaps hikers had taken shelter in the tower, unaware of the radio, or maybe it was some electrical malfunction, lights triggered by a failing system. I continued my regular scans for the next hour, finding nothing unusual. The forest had returned to its quiet state, peaceful under the moonlight. I was just finishing another perimeter check when I heard it, A sound so unexpected it froze me in place. Crying. A woman sobbing, faint but unmistakable, coming from somewhere below the tower. I stayed perfectly still, straining to hear. The sound came again, a series of broken sobs that seemed to echo among the trees. It was distant, but clear enough to make out the human quality of the sound. Not an animal, not the wind, but a person in distress. Tom's warning immediately flashed through my mind. If you hear voices in the night, especially voices that sound familiar, don't go investigating. Use the radio, call me first. But this wasn't a familiar voice. It was a stranger, a woman who sounded genuinely distressed. And it was the middle of the night, miles from the nearest road or trail. If someone was out there crying, they needed help. I grabbed the flashlight from my emergency kit and the pistol from the desk. After a moment's hesitation, I racked the slide as Tom had shown me, chambering around. The metallic sound was loud in the quiet tower, almost obscene. The stairs creaked under my weight as I descended, one hand gripping the rail, the other holding the flashlight. The crying continued, seeming to come from the north side of the tower, toward the small clearing that extended before the trees began. I paused at the bottom of the stairs, sweeping the flashlight beam across the ground. The night air was cool against my face, carrying the scent of pine and earth. The sobbing had grown softer, less frequent, as if the person was either calming down or running out of energy. "Hello?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "Is someone there? Do you need help?" The crying stopped immediately. The silence that followed was absolute, not even broken by night birds or insects. I took a few steps away from the tower base, moving toward where I thought the sound had originated. "I'm a Forest Service fire lookout," I continued. "If you're lost or hurt, I can help you." Nothing. Just the empty forest and the soft crunch of pine needles under my boots. I spent 15 minutes searching the area around the tower, moving in an expanding spiral, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. There were no footprints in the soft ground, no broken branches, no sign that anyone had passed through the area recently. The crying didn't resume. Whatever or whoever had made the sound was gone, or at least silent. A cold feeling settled in my stomach as I climbed back up to the tower. I locked the door behind me, double-checking that it was secure before returning to the desk. I picked up the radio handset, hesitating only briefly before switching to Channel 3. "Tower 4 to base. Tower 4 to base. This is David Miller. Do you copy?" Over. Static filled the small room. I tried again, this time on Channel 1. "Emergency call from Tower 4. Tom Anderson, do you copy?" Over. More static, but this time it seemed different somehow. The white noise rose and fell in a pattern that almost resembled speech, as if words were hidden just beneath the surface of the sound. I pressed the handset closer to my ear, listening intently. There, a whisper so faint I couldn't be sure I hadn't imagined it. Something that might have been my name, buried in the hiss of the empty channel. I released the call button, and the static cut off abruptly, leaving the tower in silence once more. I tried 2 more frequencies with the same result. No clear response, just that strange, almost alive static. I added the crying incident to my logbook, trying to describe it as factually as possible. 0117 hours. Female crying heard N of tower base. Investigated, found no evidence of presence, no response on radio. The rest of the night passed without incident. I continued my hourly scans, keeping the pistol within arm's reach at all times. The lights at Tower 7 didn't reappear, and the crying didn't resume. By the time dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, I had almost convinced myself that exhaustion and isolation had played tricks on my mind. But as I watched the forest emerge from darkness, the trees taking shape as individual entities rather than a solid mass of shadow, I couldn't shake the feeling that something out there was watching me back. Something that had been there all night, hidden in the darkness, observing my reactions to the lights and the crying. testing me. I rubbed my tired eyes and began preparing for my morning report. The rational part of my brain insisted there were logical explanations for everything that had happened. But another part, a more primitive instinct, whispered that Tom's warning had been more than just the cautious words of a veteran ranger. There was something wrong with these woods, and I had a feeling that last night had only been a taste of what was to come. Sunlight woke me from a fitful sleep. I sat up in the narrow bed, feeling the stiffness in my neck from dozing upright against the wall. After the crying incident and the strange lights at Tower 7, I hadn't felt comfortable lying down properly. The gun rested on my lap where I'd held it all night. I rubbed my eyes and checked my watch. Just past 7 in the morning. I'd managed maybe 3 hours of actual sleep. My 8 o'clock radio check with Tom went smoothly. I didn't mention the crying or the lights. Something held me back. Maybe the fear of sounding crazy on my second day, or maybe the need to gather more information first. After logging the morning weather conditions and completing my first forest scan of the day, I made a decision. I needed to see Tower 7 for myself. I studied the trail map again. The route between the towers looked straightforward. Follow the ridge for about 2 miles, then cut north through a valley. Tom had said the other towers were unmanned, but he hadn't forbidden me from visiting them. I packed light, water bottle, compass, map, energy bars, and the pistol tucked into my belt. The weight of the gun felt strange against my hip. I locked the tower door behind me and set out. The trail started clear enough, marked by blue blazes on trees that had grown faded with time. Soon, the path narrowed and became overgrown. Pine needles carpeted the ground, making the trail soft underfoot, but sometimes hiding exposed roots that threatened to trip me. The forest felt different on the ground than it had from my elevated perch. Massive pines towered overhead, their branches creating a cathedral-like canopy that filtered the morning sunlight into dappled patterns. The air smelled of sap and earth. About 40 minutes into my hike, the trail dipped into a small ravine. A stream trickled along smooth rocks, likely more impressive in spring when snowmelt would turn it into a proper creek. I paused to take a drink from my water bottle and check my bearings. The map showed Tower 7 should be just over the next rise. I continued upward, the trail steepening as it climbed the ridge. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the cool morning air. When I reached the top, Tower 7 came into view through a break in the trees. It was nearly identical to my own tower. The same wooden construction, raised on stilts, with an observation deck wrapping around the central room. The main difference was its position, set against a backdrop of distant snow-capped peaks that gave it an even more isolated appearance. I approached cautiously. No vehicles sat in the small clearing at its base. No footprints marked the dirt around the structure. The wooden stairs creaked under my weight as I climbed, each sound echoing in the surrounding silence. The door wasn't locked. I pushed it open and stepped inside, instinctively reaching for the gun at my belt. The room was empty of people but still contained all the standard equipment: desk, radio, map table, bed. Everything was covered in a thin layer of dust. Spiderweb stretched across corners and between furniture legs. The windows were grimy, obscuring the otherwise impressive view. I checked the radio equipment. Dead. No power. The generator outside was cold to the touch, its fuel gauge reading empty. I examined the electrical panel, finding dust accumulated in every switch and connection point. No one had used electricity here in months. I stood in the center of the room, turning slowly to take it all in. How had I seen lights from here last night? Every piece of evidence suggested the tower had been abandoned since the previous season ended. I pulled out my binoculars and looked back toward my own tower, visible as a tiny silhouette against the distant tree line. The sight lines were clear. I had definitely seen Tower 7 from my location. Something caught my eye near the desk. A logbook, similar to mine but from the previous year. I flipped it open, scanning the entries. The last one was dated September 30th, signed by S. Wilson. The handwriting was rushed but legible, noting final weather conditions and closing procedures for the season. I replaced the book and did one final sweep of the tower. Nothing else seemed noteworthy or disturbed. Whoever Sam Wilson was, he'd left the tower in proper order at the end of his watch. The climb back down felt longer than it should have. Questions tumbled through my mind. What had I seen last night? Could it have been reflections from the moon or some atmospheric phenomenon? But the light had moved between windows, showing patterns of movement too deliberate for natural causes. Instead of returning directly to my tower, I decided to take a detour. The district map had shown a river cutting through the valley to the east, and Tom had mentioned it during orientation. Maybe a walk by the water would help clear my head. The trail forked about 20 minutes from Tower 7. I took the eastern path, which gradually sloped downward through increasingly dense forest. The pine trees gave way to more varied growth, aspen, birch, and undergrowth that suggested more consistent water access. The sound of the river reached me before I saw it, a steady rushing that grew louder as I approached. The trail ended at a small clearing where the forest opened up to reveal a wide, rocky riverbed. The water ran clear and cold, moving swiftly over smooth stones. I sat on a boulder near the bank, took off my boots, and dipped my feet into the frigid water. The cold shock felt good after the hike. I ate one of my energy bars, watching small fish dart between rocks in the shallows. After resting for about 15 minutes, I pulled my feet out of the water and dried them on my shirt. As I was putting my boots back on, I noticed something through the trees on the opposite bank, a flash of weathered wood that didn't match the living forest around it. Curious, I crossed the river, hopping from stone to stone at a narrow section. The water only reached my ankles at its deepest point. A faint game trail led through a stand of white-barked birch trees. Following it for about 50 yards, I emerged into another small clearing and stopped short. A cabin stood before me, small, rustic, built from rough-hewn logs with a slanted roof. It wasn't large, maybe 15 feet square, but it was undeniably man-made and definitely not marked on any of my maps. The front door hung partially open, swinging slightly in the breeze. It creaked with each movement, the sound somehow more ominous than it should have been in the daylight. I approached slowly, one hand resting on the pistol at my hip. "Hello?" I called out. "Anyone here?" No response came from inside. I stepped onto the small porch, wood planks groaning under my weight. Leaning forward, I peered through the doorway. The interior was dim but visible in the light that filtered through a single dusty window. The cabin consisted of one room with sparse furnishings, a metal-framed cot against the far wall with a sleeping bag unzipped atop it, a rough wooden table with 2 chairs, shelves built into one wall holding canned food and supplies. I stepped inside, the floorboards creaking beneath me. The air smelled musty but not stale. This place had been opened recently. A Forest Service jacket hung from a peg by the door. The size tag read M. Roberts. The sleeping bag looked recently used, rumpled in a way that suggested someone had slept there not too long ago. A battery-powered lantern sat on the table next to a neat stack of notebooks. I picked up the top notebook. It was standard issue, identical to the logbook in my tower, but this one was filled with handwritten entries. The first page contained a name and date. Sam Wilson, Fire Lookout, Tower 7, May 15th. I flipped through the early pages. They contained exactly what you'd expect from a fire lookout's journal: weather conditions, temperature readings, observations about smoke patterns and wildlife. Sam's handwriting was neat and methodical, his entries detailed and professional. June 3rd, clear conditions, temp high 70 degrees, low 48 degrees. No smoke spotted. Deer sighted near East Ridge. Mark hiked to Tower 4 for equipment check. June 15th, light rain in morning, cleared by noon. Temp high 68 degrees, low 52 degrees. Spotted smoke 7 miles SW. Lightning strike on dead tree. Self-extinguished. Radio contact with Ranger Johnson confirmed. I continued flipping through the pages, watching the dates progress through June and into July. Around mid-July, the tone of the entries began to shift subtly. July 18th, clear, hot. Temp high 85 degree, low 60 degree, no smoke. Heard strange sounds from North Valley around 2 a.m. Possibly coyotes or wolves, but didn't sound quite right. Mark didn't hear anything. We'll monitor. The next few entries mentioned similar nighttime sounds, described as crying or calling. Sam's handwriting remained steady, but his entries grew longer, more detailed about these nocturnal disturbances. By early August, the change became more pronounced. August 3rd, partly cloudy. Temp high 80 degree for, low 55 degree for. No smoke reported. The sounds came again last night. Mark thinks it's just an animal, but I know what a mountain lion sounds like. This was a woman's voice calling for help. We searched the north slope for 2 hours. Found nothing, not even tracks. Mark thinks I'm getting cabin fever. I felt a chill run down my back. Sam's description matched exactly what I'd heard last night. As I turned more pages, Sam's handwriting grew increasingly uneven. His entries became less about weather and fire conditions and more about the voices and strange sightings. The neat margins disappeared as his writing sprawled across the pages. August 12th. Something is out there. It called to me using my mother's voice last night. My mother has been dead for 9 years. Mark doesn't believe me, says I need to sleep more. But I know what I heard. It knew her voice. How could it know her voice? August 17th. Mark heard it too last night. It used his sister's voice, called him by a childhood nickname only she uses. His sister lives in Seattle. He tried to radio Tom but couldn't get through. The static on the radio forms words sometimes if you listen closely. I turned the page and found a dramatic change. The writing was frantic, pressed so hard into the paper that it left indentations on the pages beneath. August 23rd. Mark is gone. Went to check on crying by the river last night. I told him not to go. Told him. He didn't come back. Spent all day searching. Found nothing. Radio still not working right. Something is jamming the signal. It's hunting us. August 25th. Found Mark's body. By the river. Can't describe it. Not a bear, not a wolf, not anything natural. Torn apart in ways that don't make sense. Called emergency evac on radio. Just static. Just that voice in the static. It's learning my voice, watching me through the windows at night. Tall, too thin, moves wrong. The next entry was dated 3 days later. August 28th. It's outside every night now. Can see it moving between trees. Can hear it practicing my voice, getting better at it. Soon it will be perfect. It wants me to come outside. Says things only I would know. Things from my dreams. It knows my name. I flipped to the final pages. The writing was barely legible, words scrawled at angles across the paper, some pressing so hard they'd torn through. It knows my voice, it knows my voice, can't let it use my voice, can't let it speak with my voice to lure others, it knows, it knows, it knows. The last pages were stained with dark brown splotches. Blood, dried blood that had soaked into the paper, making some of the final words illegible. I closed the journal, my hands shaking. The cabin suddenly felt colder, darker, despite the daylight outside. I looked back at the sleeping bag on the cot, picturing Sam Wilson writing these entries, growing more desperate and terrified with each passing day. And I understood why Tom had given me the gun. I gathered all the notebooks, stuffing them into my backpack. They might contain information I needed to survive. With one last look around the cabin, I stepped back outside, pulling the door firmly closed behind me. The forest seemed different now. Less peaceful, more watchful. Every shadow between the trees held new potential meaning. Every sound carried possible threat. I crossed the river and practically jogged back to the main trail, eager to return to the relative safety of my tower before darkness fell. All the while, I couldn't shake the image of Sam's final entries. the desperate scrawl of a man trying to warn others about something that defied explanation, something that might now be watching me. I made it back to my tower just as the sun reached its peak. My heart hadn't stopped racing since I'd left the cabin. I climbed the stairs two at a time, locked the door behind me, and dumped the journals on my desk. My hands shook as I arranged them chronologically based on the dates written on their covers. The tower felt different now. What had been merely an isolated workspace now felt like a fragile shelter, the only barrier between me and whatever lurked in the forest. I glanced at the gun Tom had given me, its purpose suddenly clear. I made myself a cup of instant coffee and sat down with the earliest journal. My watch read just past 1 in the afternoon. I had hours of daylight left, plenty of time to read through Sam's accounts. The first journal started in May of the previous year. Sam Wilson had a meticulous hand, each entry precisely dated and formatted with weather conditions, temperature readings, and standard Forest Service observations. In those early pages, he sounded like any dedicated fire lookout, professional, observant, and methodical. May 18th, partly cloudy. Temp high 65 degrees, low 42 degrees. No smoke spotted. Mark spotted 3 elk crossing the eastern ridge around sunset. Radio check with base completed at 800 and 2000. Mark appeared frequently in the entries. Mark Roberts, Sam's partner at Tower 7. They seemed to have a good working relationship, trading shifts and sharing responsibilities. I flipped through the pages, skimming the routine entries until mid-June, when the first hint of something unusual appeared. June 17th, clear skies, temp high 70 degrees, low 48 degrees. No smoke. Heard strange sounds from the valley around midnight, possibly an animal in distress. Mark suggested mountain lion. Will monitor. The next week contained more references to nighttime sounds described as crying or wailing. Sam's tone remained professional, treating the incidents as curious but not alarming. By early July, the entries took on a more detailed quality. July 2nd. Clear, hot day. Temp high 82 degree, low 55 degree. No smoke reported. The crying sound returned last night, clearer than before. Definitely sounded like a woman's voice calling for help. Mark and I used flashlights to scan the area from the observation deck, but saw nothing. Too dangerous to investigate at night. We'll check the area tomorrow. July 3rd. Searched the North Valley where the sounds seemed to originate. Found no signs of hikers or campers, no footprints, no disturbed vegetation, no equipment. Mark thinks I'm hearing things. I know what I heard. I paused, coffee halfway to my lips. The description matched exactly what I'd experienced last night, a woman's crying, seemingly coming from nowhere. I continued reading, a cold feeling settling in my stomach. Through July, Sam's entries grew longer and more detailed about the nocturnal disturbances. His handwriting remained steady, but I noticed slight changes in his language. More personal observations, fewer technical notes. July 19th. The woman's voice called again last night. It sounded closer to the tower. She was calling for help, saying she was lost. I wanted to go look, but Mark insisted we follow protocol and not venture out after dark. He's right, but it's hard to ignore someone who sounds so desperate. July 22nd. Mark finally heard the voice too. He agrees it sounds like a woman, but still thinks it's likely an animal. Mountain lions can sound remarkably human when they call. But I've heard mountain lions before, and this is different. This has words. I moved to the second journal, which started in August. The change in tone was immediate and striking. August 1st. The voice has changed. Last night, it didn't sound like a random woman anymore. It sounded like my mother. Called me Sammy the way she used to when I was a kid. My mother died 9 years ago. Mark didn't hear the resemblance, says I'm letting my imagination run wild. But I know my mother's voice. My skin crawled as I read that entry. I thought about what Tom had said before leaving me here. If you hear voices in the night, especially voices that sound familiar. Don't go investigating. The next entries documented Sam's growing unease and Mark's continued skepticism. August 5th, Mark thinks I need more sleep, says I'm getting tower fever. But the voice came again last night and it knew things. Things my mother would know, private things from my childhood. How is that possible? August 8th, spotted something moving between the trees last night. Tall, thin shape. When I pointed the flashlight at it, it was gone. Mark says it was probably just shadows from the trees moving in the wind. There was no wind last night. August 12th. Mark heard it call his name last night. Not a woman's voice this time, his sister's voice. Called him Marky, which only his sister in Seattle uses. He tried to radio base but couldn't get through. Just static. He doesn't think it's an animal anymore. The entries grew more disturbed as August progressed. Sam's neat handwriting began to slant, pressing harder into the page. August 15th. Neither of us slept last night. The voices now, circled the tower for hours. Sometimes my mother, sometimes Mark's sister, sometimes voices I don't recognize. Mark wants to hike out tomorrow and report this. Radio still not working properly, just static that almost sounds like whispers. I looked at my own radio, sitting silent on the desk. I remembered the strange static I'd heard last night, the whispers just below the surface of the white noise. Then came the entry that made my blood run cold. August 18th. Mark is gone. We heard crying by the river last night, a woman begging for help. Mark went to check despite my objections. He took the rifle and a flashlight. He hasn't come back. Spent all day searching the riverbank. Found his flashlight but no other signs. Radio still not working. I'm alone now. I thought about the cabin by the river where I'd found these journals, about how close I'd been to the place where Mark had disappeared. August 21st. 3 days. No sign of Mark. The voices have stopped. The silence is worse somehow. I feel like I'm being watched constantly. Something moves in the trees at night. Too tall to be human. Too thin. It stands at the edge of the clearing and watches the tower. I've fired warning shots. It retreats, but always comes back. I turned the page to an entry that made me push away from the desk. August 24th. Found Mark. By the river. What was left of him. Not a bear attack. Not wolves. His body was wrong. Torn apart in ways that don't match any animal I know. Some parts missing. Others arranged in ways that seemed deliberate. I buried what I could. Tried emergency channels on the radio. Nothing but that whispering static. It's learning to talk through the radio now. I can make out words sometimes. My name. Mark's name. It's learning. My hands trembled as I turned the pages. The writing grew increasingly erratic, some entries only partial, others running together with no clear dates. It's outside every night now. Standing just beyond the trees, watching. I've seen it move, not like anything natural, like it has too many joints, too many limbs. When I point the flashlight, it's gone, but I can hear it moving through the brush. It's practicing my voice now. I can hear it testing out words, getting my tone right, my accent, saying things I've said into the radio. It's like it's building a library of my sounds. I moved to the final journal, the one with blood-stained pages at the end. Sam's writing was barely recognizable now, scrawled at angles across the paper. I know what it wants. It wants my voice perfect so it can call to others, lure them out like it did with Mark. It needs to sound exactly right. That's why it watches and listens for so long, learning, becoming. I barricaded the door. Doesn't matter. It doesn't try to get in. Just watches, waits, learns. Tower 7 is visible from here. I've seen lights there. Someone new. God help them if so. The lights I'd seen. Tower 7. My skin prickled with goosebumps. Radio still dead. Just its voice coming through now. Using my mother's voice, Mark's voice, my voice. Playing back things I've said. Getting better at it. Soon it will be perfect. The entries became shorter, more fragmented. Can't sleep. It calls all night. Knows things only I would know. Things from my dreams. How? It wants me to come out. Keeps saying it can help me find Mark. Mark is dead. I buried him. The final pages were difficult to read, not just because of the frantic writing, but because of the dark stains that had soaked into the paper. Blood. Sam's blood. I know what I have to do. It can't have my voice. Can't let it use me to call others. Can't let it become me. I've moved to the cabin. Harder for it to watch me here. Fewer windows. When Tom comes for seasonal shutdown, it would use my voice to call him. He wouldn't know. Would think it was me. Can't let that happen. The last entry was barely legible, written in huge letters that stretched across 2 pages. It knows my voice. It knows my name. It will become me. Can't let it use my voice to lure others. Can't let it have my voice. Can't let it have my voice. I closed the journal and pushed it away. The implications were clear. Sam Wilson had killed himself in that cabin. He'd put a gun to his head, probably the same model Glock that now sat on my desk, and pulled the trigger. Not out of fear or despair, but as a final act of defiance. He'd silenced his voice so the creature couldn't use it. And Tom had known. Maybe not everything, but enough to arm me before leaving me alone in this tower. Enough to warn me about voices in the night. The gun wasn't for bears or mountain lions. It was for something else. Something that mimicked human voices to lure its prey. I looked out the windows at the surrounding forest. The afternoon sun cast long shadows between the trees, creating dark spaces where anything could hide. The forest that had seemed so peaceful just days ago now felt like a habitat for something hostile and cunning. I thought about the crying I'd heard last night, the woman's voice that had drawn me out of the tower just as Mark had been drawn to the river. I thought about the static on the radio, the whispers just below the surface. I checked that the gun was loaded, laying it on the desk where I could reach it quickly. I had at least 4 hours of daylight left. 4 hours to decide what to do next. 4 hours before darkness fell and the forest became its domain again. I didn't sleep. How could I? Sam's blood-stained journal lay on my desk like a death sentence, its final frantic warnings playing on repeat in my mind. All night I sat by the window, gun in hand, watching the tree line for any movement, any shape too tall or too thin to be natural. At 5 a.m, I made coffee with shaking hands. The eastern sky had barely started to lighten, but I couldn't wait any longer. I grabbed the radio handset and switched to channel 3. Tower 4 to base. Tower 4 to base. Tom, I need to speak with you immediately. It's an emergency. I waited, hearing only static in response. I repeated my call, pressing the transmit button so hard my knuckles turned white. Tower 4 to base. Tom Anderson, respond now. This is about Sam Wilson. The static crackled, shifted, then broke. Base to Tower 4. Tom's voice came through, gravelly and tired. What's your emergency, David? I found Sam Wilson's journals, in a cabin by the river. I kept my voice steady despite my anger. I know about Mark. I know about the voices. I know what's out there. Silence stretched for so long, I thought the connection had broken. When Tom finally responded, his voice had changed, heavier, resigned. I was hoping you wouldn't find that cabin. You owe me an explanation right now. Another long pause followed. Not over the radio. Too many ears in the forest. Then get up here. Today. Can't. Flash flood warning on the access road after yesterday's storm in the mountains. Bridge is underwater. I gripped the handset tighter. Then talk, now, or I'm hiking out today. I heard Tom sigh, the sound distorting through the radio speaker. Yes, Sam Wilson and Mark Roberts worked Tower 7 last season. They were good men. Experienced. What happened to them? The official report says Mark died from a bear attack. His body was found by the river, badly mauled. You don't believe that? Another pause. No, I've seen bear attacks. This was different. I thought about Sam's description, torn apart in ways that don't match any animal I know. And Sam? After finding Mark, he started making reports. Strange sounds at night. Voices calling from the woods. A figure watching the tower. He killed himself, I said. In that cabin. Yes. Tom's voice dropped lower. We found him with a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. His note said he couldn't let it use his voice anymore. My free hand drifted to the pistol at my side, the same model that Sam had likely used to end his life. You knew all this, and you still stationed me here alone? The radio crackled with what might have been a bitter laugh. Would you have taken the job if I told you? That's not the point, I snapped. You used me as bait. Not bait, Tom corrected. A test. A test for what? To see if what happened was real, or if Sam just lost his mind out here. It wouldn't be the first time isolation broke someone. I laughed, the sound hollow even to my ears. So, you needed someone watching for fires, and you figured you'd also see if the monster that maybe killed your last two lookouts was real or not. Great plan, Tom. We've had incidents over the years, Tom continued, ignoring my sarcasm. Lookouts reporting voices in the night. Strange figures moving through the trees. 3 people have gone missing from these towers in the last decade. Always ruled as accidents or animal attacks. Always during the night. I thought about the crying I'd heard, the lights at Tower 7. It's real. Whatever Sam described in his journal, it's real. I've heard it. The radio went silent again. When Tom spoke next, his voice had dropped to nearly a whisper. Tell me. I described what I'd experienced. The woman's crying, the lights at Tower 7, the whispers in the radio static. Tom listened without interrupting. You've seen more activity in 4 days than most lookouts report in a season, he finally said, because it's hunting me now. I watched the trees outside, searching for any unnatural movement. It found a new target. David, listen to me. Tom's voice grew urgent. Pack your essentials, just what you can carry. I'll send a helicopter extraction as soon as the weather clears. Stay inside the tower, keep the door locked. Don't go out at night for any reason. Why didn't you warn me properly? I asked, the question that had burned in me all night. A cryptic warning about voices and a loaded gun? That's all you gave me? Tom was quiet for a moment. We need these towers manned. Fire season is getting worse every year. Budget cuts mean we're already short-handed. When we tell people the truth up front, they refuse the assignment, or they quit within days. So you lie. We omit certain historical details. I watched the sun finally break over the eastern ridge, painting the forest in gold. The beauty of it seemed obscene now, knowing what lurked beneath the canopy. How many people have died because of your omissions, Tom? Not as many as would die if we left these mountains unwatched during fire season. His voice hardened. It's a calculated risk. For us, not for you. I've spent 30 years in these mountains, David. I've seen things I can't explain, lost friends to things I can't name. Don't think I make these decisions lightly. The radio fell silent. I watched an eagle soar across the valley, free and oblivious to the horrors below. The offer stands, Tom finally said. First helicopter available will get you out. Full pay for the season. Excellent recommendation. No one would blame you. I should have said yes immediately. Any sane person would have. But something kept me from accepting. Maybe pride, maybe stubbornness, maybe the strange feeling that running now would haunt me forever. I need time to think about it. David, I'll radio you with my decision by this evening. I paused, then added, and Tom, don't lie to me again. I hung up the handset before he could respond. The tower felt smaller now, more exposed. Glass windows on all sides suddenly seemed like a vulnerability rather than an advantage. I'd spent 4 days here thinking my only job was watching for fires, when all along something had been watching me. I moved to the desk and spread out Sam's journals again. If I was going to make a decision, I needed to know exactly what I was facing. I flipped back to the entries from July, when the encounters first began, and started reading more carefully. The tower creaked in the morning breeze. Out of habit, I scanned the forest through my binoculars, checking for smoke. The mountains stretched before me, beautiful and treacherous. Miles of unbroken wilderness where anything could hide. And somewhere in those trees, something waited. Something that knew how to use human voices to lure its prey. Something that had already killed once and driven another man to suicide. Something that might now be learning my voice. I closed Sam's journal and set it on top of the stack, my decision made. The morning sun streamed through the eastern windows, casting long shadows across the tower floor. I wasn't leaving. Not yet. Maybe it was stubborn pride. Maybe it was the fact that running away now would leave me looking over my shoulder forever, wondering what exactly had been hunting me in these mountains. Or maybe it was because Tom's casual disregard for my safety had lit something defiant in me. Whatever the reason, I picked up the radio handset again. Tower 4 to base, I'm staying. The reply came almost immediately. David, think about this. I already did. I cut in. You said it yourself. These mountains need watching. Fire season's getting worse. I signed a contract. This isn't about contracts. No, it's about you putting me up here without all the facts. I took a deep breath. But I'm here now, and I'm staying. On my terms. Tom was quiet for a moment. What terms? Complete honesty from now on. Everything you know about what's out there, full disclosure on any previous incidents, and daily check-ins, not just morning and night. I can do that, Tom agreed, sounding relieved despite his earlier protests. And the helicopter option remains open. You change your mind, you radio, we get you out. Understood. I set the handset down and looked out at the forest stretching endlessly in all directions. My domain, my battlefield. I spent the rest of the day preparing. First, I took inventory of my supplies. Food, water, batteries, first aid kit. I had enough to last weeks without resupply. Next, I inspected the tower itself, testing the locks on the door and hatch, checking for any vulnerable points. The structure was old but solid, the windows intact, the door heavy and secure. I arranged my living space differently, pushing the bed against the wall farthest from the door and windows. I kept the gun on me at all times, the weight of it in my pocket a constant reminder of what I was up against. As evening approached, I completed my regular firewatch duties with meticulous attention. The forests were quiet, no smoke on the horizon, just endless green canopy turning gold in the setting sun. Beautiful and deadly. Night fell quickly in the mountains. I pulled the curtains closed, but left a gap wide enough to keep watch. The darkness seemed alive, pressing against the windows like a physical presence. I sat at the desk with the pistol beside me and Sam's journals open for reference. Midnight came and went. I conducted my regular scan, sweeping each quadrant methodically. Nothing unusual. Just as I was completing the eastern section, I heard it. Hello? Is anyone there? My voice, coming from directly below the tower. I froze, handset halfway to the radio. The voice was perfect. Every inflection, every subtle quirk of my speech patterns reproduced with uncanny precision. I need help, my voice called again. I'm looking for Sarah. Has anyone seen Sarah? My breath caught. Sarah. The creature had heard me mention her name during my radio calls with Tom. It was using information it had gleaned, testing to see what might draw me out. Sarah left me, my voice continued, a perfect imitation of my own wounded tone. "I need to find her. Can you help me find Sarah?" I moved to the window and peered out through a narrow gap in the curtains. The moon was bright enough to illuminate the clearing below. At first, I saw nothing. Then a shadow moved near the base of the tower, something tall and thin shifting between patches of moonlight. "She has to be out here somewhere," my voice called. "Sarah, where are you?" I backed away from the window, gun in hand. The creature knew about Sarah. It was using my own pain, my own vulnerability, as bait. Just as Sam had described in his journal, it's learning, becoming. I didn't sleep that night. The voice continued calling for hours, sometimes using my exact tone, sometimes distorting it slightly. By dawn, it had gone silent, but I knew it wasn't gone. Just waiting, learning, planning its next move. The morning brought clear skies and no sign of anything unusual in the forest. I completed my 8 o'clock check-in with Tom, describing what I'd heard. He listened gravely, then advised me to document everything. "It's escalating faster with you," he noted. "With Sam and Mark, it took weeks before it started using their voices." "Maybe because it's already learned how to hunt," I replied, watching a hawk circle lazily above the trees. "It's getting more efficient." The day passed slowly. I performed my duties, scanning for fires, logging weather conditions, all while keeping one eye on the tree line. Nothing moved except birds and the occasional deer. Nothing seemed out of place. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, studied, assessed. Late in the afternoon, as I was conducting my routine fire danger assessment, movement caught my eye. Not in the forest, but in Tower 7. I swung my binoculars toward the distant structure. A dark figure moved behind one of the windows. Tall, unnaturally thin, it seemed to flow rather than walk, disappearing from one window only to appear at another. I focused the binoculars, trying to make out details, but the figure stayed in the shadows. Then it was gone. I kept watching for several minutes, scanning each window of Tower 7, but saw nothing further. I lowered the binoculars, blinking away the strain, and raised them again for one final look. That's when I saw them. Handprints on the outside of the glass. Large, elongated handprints with too many fingers pressed against the windows as if something had been clinging to the outside of the tower, watching me as I watched it. My stomach twisted. I'd been in Tower 7 just days ago. I'd stood in that room, touched those windows, and now something else had been there. Something that had left marks that no human or animal could make. I radioed Tom immediately. "I saw it," I said without preamble. "At Tower 7, and it left handprints on the glass." "Handprints?" Tom's voice sharpened with interest. "You're sure? Not human ones, too large, too many fingers, like it was hanging on the outside of the tower." Tom was quiet for a moment. "It's never done that before. Left physical evidence we could document. The other incidents, there were tracks sometimes, but nothing this deliberate." "It's showing off," I said, the realization hitting me suddenly. "Letting me know it can reach the towers, that nowhere is safe." "Or it's getting careless," Tom countered. "More aggressive, less cautious. That could be useful information." I wasn't sure which possibility was worse. Evening came too quickly. I secured the tower, checking and rechecking the locks. I ate a cold dinner, not wanting to use the stove and create light that might be visible from outside. As darkness fell, I positioned myself at the desk with a clear view of the radio and all 4 walls of the tower. At exactly 9:30, the radio crackled to life. "Base to Tower 4. David, do you copy?" Tom's voice came through clearly. I picked up the handset. "Tower 4 here. What's up, Tom?" "We have an emergency situation at Tower 7. Tom's voice was urgent but controlled. "Need you to head over there immediately to check it out." I froze, handset halfway to my mouth. Tower 7 was empty. Tom knew that. More importantly, Tom would never ask me to leave my tower at night. Not after everything we'd discussed about the creature. "What kind of emergency?" I asked cautiously. "Picked up some unusual readings from the automated equipment there," the voice continued. It sounded like Tom, the same gruff tone, the same slight accent. But something was off. The cadence was wrong, the speech pattern too formal. "Tom would never ask me to go to Tower 7 at night," I said flatly. The radio was silent for a moment. Then, "This is a direct order, David. Emergency protocol requires immediate response." Another wrong note. Tom knew I was a seasonal hire, not a full-time Forest Service employee. He couldn't give me direct orders. "You're not Tom," I said, tightening my grip on the pistol. "Who is this?" The radio crackled with static, then cleared. "Of course it's me. Don't be ridiculous. There's a situation that needs your attention." "No." I kept my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Tom told me never to leave the tower at night. He specifically warned me about voices trying to lure me out." More static. Longer this time. When the voice returned, it had changed subtly, still recognizable as Tom's, but with an undercurrent of something else, something that made the hair on my neck stand up. "Listen carefully, David Miller." The fake Tom's voice took on a harder edge. "There is a fire starting at Tower 7. If you don't check it immediately, it will spread. Lives depend on your response." "No," I repeated. "You're not Tom. You're not human." The voice changed again, anger seeping into its tone. "You will come to Tower 7 now, or there will be consequences." "I'm not going anywhere." I kept the handset pressed to my ear, morbidly fascinated by this exchange. "And you can't get in here." A sound came through the radio then, not speech, but a noise like metal grinding against metal, raw and discordant. It rose in pitch until it became almost a scream, then cut off abruptly. Silence followed, broken only by the normal background static of the radio. I waited, but the voice didn't return. I set the handset down with shaking hands. The creature had dropped its pretense entirely, revealing something of its true nature in that inhuman sound. It wasn't just mimicking voices. It was deliberately using them to manipulate, to create false emergencies, to exploit any weakness it could find. And it was getting bolder. First using my voice in the forest, then showing itself at Tower 7, now attempting to use the radio, one of my few connections to the outside world, against me. I documented the incident in my logbook, writing down every detail while it was still fresh in my mind. The exact wording, the changes in tone, the final inhuman sound that had ended our exchange. Outside, the forest was quiet, too quiet. No insects chirping, no night birds calling, as if everything living had gone silent in the presence of something that didn't belong. I checked my watch. Just past 10. Hours of darkness still ahead. I settled in for another sleepless night, the pistol close at hand, my eyes moving constantly between the windows and the silent radio. The creature was learning my routines, my responses, my weaknesses, testing me, and I was learning too, about its methods, its limitations, its growing boldness. This was no longer just about surviving until the helicopter came. This was about understanding what I was up against, because one thing was becoming increasingly clear. The creature wasn't going to give up easily. It had found its new prey, and it was just getting started. I jerked awake, my neck stiff from falling asleep in the chair by the desk. Something had pulled me from the thin veil of sleep I'd managed to find after midnight. I blinked, trying to clear my vision as I checked my watch, 3:17 in the morning. "David, are you up there, babe?" My body went rigid. Sarah's voice, coming from outside below the tower. "David, please, I need your help. My car broke down on the access road." Every syllable, every rise and fall of her speech pattern was exactly right. The slightly nasal quality when she got anxious, the way her voice lifted at the end of questions. "It's me, Teddy Bear. Please come down." Teddy Bear. The nickname she'd given me 2 years ago when I'd worn a brown sweater she said made me look cuddly. A name she'd only ever used in private. I grabbed the pistol from the desk and moved to the window, carefully pulling back the curtain just enough to see out without being obvious. The moon hung nearly full in the clear night sky, casting silver-blue light across the clearing below. And there she was, a figure standing at the base of the tower stairs, the right height, the right build. Even from this distance, I could make out what looked like Sarah's favorite denim jacket and the curve of her ponytail. "I drove all the way up here to talk to you," her voice continued. "I made a terrible mistake, David. I want to work things out." My chest tightened. How many times had I imagined her saying those exact words? How many nights had I lain awake hoping she'd realize what we had was worth fighting for? But Sam's journals flashed in my mind. The creature using voices of loved ones, learning intimate details, exploiting weaknesses. I moved to the observation deck, the exterior platform that wrapped around the tower. The wooden boards creaked under my weight as I stepped outside, gun gripped tightly in my right hand. The night air bit at my skin, sharp and cold. "Sarah?" I called down, keeping my distance from the railing. The figure looked up, and something about the movement seemed wrong, too fluid, like her neck stretched further than any human neck should be able to. "David, thank God. I've been calling for hours." Her voice broke with what sounded like relief. "Please come down. I need your help with the car." I stayed where I was, focusing on the figure below. In the silver moonlight, something else became clear. Her arms hung too long at her sides, the fingers extending almost to her knees. "What happened to your car?" I asked, stalling while I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. "The engine just died on the access road. I had to walk the last mile. Please, it's freezing out here. Let me in." The figure took a step toward the stairs, and the movement was all wrong, jerky but too smooth at the same time, like someone trying to remember how humans walk. "How did you find me?" I kept my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I never told you where I was going." A moment's pause. "Your mom told me. I went to see her to talk about us. She gave me the address." Another lie. My mother had died when I was 19. "Step into the clearing," I said, "where I can see you better." The figure hesitated, then moved forward into a patch of bright moonlight. What I saw drained the blood from my face. It had Sarah's general shape, but everything was distorted. The skin pulled too tight across an emaciated frame. The arms hung unnaturally long, the neck extended several inches too far, and the face, it had attempted to form Sarah's features, but the eyes were just dark, empty hollows. The mouth stretched wider than any human mouth should, with no lips, just a gash in the pale, waxy skin. "What's wrong, teddy bear?" The perfect Sarah voice continued coming from that twisted face. "Don't you want to work things out? I miss you so much." I raised the pistol, aiming at the center of its chest. "You're not Sarah." The creature tilted its head at an impossible angle, nearly 90 degrees. "Don't be stupid, David. Of course it's me." The voice changed subtly, taking on the hard edge Sarah got when she was angry. "This is exactly why I left you in the first place. You never listen. You always think you know better." The words hit like a physical blow. They were nearly verbatim what Sarah had said during our last fight, the night she walked out. "You're selfish and blind," the Sarah voice continued, mimicking the exact cadence of our final argument. "You care more about your precious space than any real connection. That's why you're hiding in this tower, isn't it? Running away from your feelings like you always do." My finger tightened on the trigger. The creature was using Sarah's words, her actual words, as weapons. "I gave you everything," it continued in Sarah's voice, now thick with tears, "and you couldn't even try to meet me halfway. Just like now. I drive all the way up here to apologize, and you won't even come down to talk to me." I steadied my aim and pulled the trigger. The gunshot cracked through the silent night. The bullet hit the creature in the shoulder. It jerked backward but didn't fall. A dark stain spread across its pale skin. Not red like blood, but black like oil. I fired again, and a third time. The creature stumbled back with each impact, more black fluid leaking from the wounds. It let out a sound that tore through the air. A high, metallic shriek that made my teeth vibrate in my skull. The noise was completely inhuman, like steel beams being twisted apart. The creature turned and ran toward the tree line, moving with unnatural speed on two long limbs. It vanished into the darkness beneath the pines. I kept the gun trained on the spot where it had disappeared, my breathing coming in sharp bursts. "David!" Sarah's voice called from somewhere in the trees to my left. "Why did you do that, David? I just wanted to talk." Then from the right, "Tower 4, this is Tom. We have an emergency situation." Tom's voice, perfect in every detail. "I need you to come to my location immediately." The voices kept coming, circling the tower, calling from different positions in the forest. "David Miller." A new voice, one I'd never heard before but assumed belonged to Sam Wilson. "You made it angry. It doesn't like being hurt. Now it will never stop." I backed into the tower, slammed the door, and locked it. I dragged the small table in front of the door, then pushed the cabinet against the hatch in the floor that led to the stairs. My hands shook as I grabbed the radio handset. "Tower 4 to base, emergency." My voice cracked. "Tom, are you there? I need help." Static answered me, then cleared. "Base to Tower 4. What's your emergency, David?" Tom's actual voice came through thick with sleep. "It was here, outside the tower. It looked like—" I swallowed hard. It was impersonating Sarah. I shot it. 3 times. It ran into the forest, but it's still out there, still calling. "You actually saw it?" Tom sounded fully awake now, his voice tense. "Yes, it was—" I struggled to find words. Not human. Stretched. Wrong. But wearing her shape like a costume. "Are you secure? Door locked?" "Yes. Barricaded everything." "Good. Stay put. I'm sending help. Armed rangers. They'll be there by first light." In the background, I could hear Tom talking to someone else, his voice urgent but muffled. "David, listen to me," he continued. "What you did, shooting it, no one has ever reported actually wounding it before. This is new territory." From outside, the voices continued calling. Sarah begging, Tom ordering, Sam warning. They overlapped now, creating a disorienting chorus. "It's using different voices," I told Tom. "Yours, Sarah's. Someone I think is Sam Wilson. Don't engage. Don't respond. Just wait for first light. Help is coming." I set down the handset and moved to the window, keeping to the side to peek through the curtains. The clearing below was empty, but the voices continued from the darkness beyond. They grew louder, more insistent, more distorted as the minutes passed. Sarah's voice began incorporating phrases from our most intimate conversations. Tom's voice started describing fires that needed my immediate attention. Sam's voice kept warning me about what the creature would do now that I'd heard it. I checked my watch. 4:15 in the morning. Hours until dawn. Hours until help would arrive. I reloaded the pistol with shaking hands, counting my remaining ammunition. 12 rounds left. The voices outside rose and fell like waves, sometimes loud enough to make the windows vibrate, sometimes dropping to whispers that I strained to hear. I sat with my back against the wall farthest from any windows or doors, the gun resting on my knee, and waited for the dawn that seemed impossibly far away. The first rays of dawn crept across the horizon, painting the eastern sky in pale gold and pink. I hadn't moved from my position against the wall, pistol still resting on my knee, eyes burning from hours without sleep. As sunlight gradually filled the tower, the voices grew fainter until they stopped altogether. The silence felt almost as unnerving as the cacophony had been. I rose stiffly, my joints protesting after hours in the same position, and approached the window. The clearing below appeared peaceful in the morning light. Birds flitted between trees at the forest edge. A doe and her fawn cautiously emerged from the tree line, grazing on the dewy grass. Nothing remained to suggest the horror of the night before. Nothing visible from my vantage point anyway. I kept the gun in my hand as I moved around the tower, checking each window, scanning the surrounding forest. My stomach growled, reminding me I hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon, but food seemed trivial compared to the need for vigilance. The radio crackled to life around 7. Base to Tower 4. David, do you copy? I approached cautiously, still wary after the creature's attempt to mimic Tom's voice the previous night. This is Tower 4, I answered, deliberately avoiding identifying myself. David, it's Tom. We're on our way up. ETA about 2 hours. How are you holding up? I considered my response carefully. Still here. Still alive. Good man. We've got 2 armed rangers with me. Just hang tight. I'll be here, I said, setting the handset down. I forced myself to eat something, settling on a protein bar and lukewarm coffee from yesterday. My hands had finally stopped shaking, replaced by a strange, detached calm that felt dangerous in its own way. I knew I should document what had happened while it was fresh in my mind, but the thought of putting it on paper seemed to give it more power, more reality. Instead, I showered under the solar bag, the cold water shocking my system back to alertness. I changed into clean clothes, trying to restore some sense of normalcy, despite knowing nothing would ever be normal again. Around 9, I heard the distant rumble of vehicles approaching. I peered through binoculars toward the access road and spotted a Forest Service truck, followed by a green Jeep with government plates. Relief flooded through me at the sight of actual people, actual help. I watched them park in the clearing where I'd left my truck what felt like a lifetime ago. 3 figures emerged, Tom's stocky form easily recognizable even from a distance, accompanied by 2 taller men in Forest Service uniforms, rifles slung over their shoulders. I considered going down to meet them, but decided against it. The tower still felt like the only safe place, despite what had happened. I'd wait for them to come to me. 20 minutes later, heavy footsteps sounded on the wooden stairs. A sharp knock followed. David, it's Tom Anderson. I moved the cabinet away from the hatch and the table from the door, then unlocked it with the gun still in my hand. Tom stood there looking exactly as I remembered. Weathered face, salt and pepper beard, tired eyes. Behind him were 2 rangers, both in their 30s, one with a buzz cut and the other with a red beard. Jesus, kid. Tom looked me up and down. You look like hell. I stepped back to let them enter. Been a long night. The rangers introduced themselves as Peterson and Ramirez. They moved with the cautious efficiency of men accustomed to dangerous situations, eyes scanning the tower, hands never far from their weapons. You shot it? Ramirez asked without preamble. I nodded. 3 times, center mass, and it walked away. Not a question. Ran, I corrected. Into the trees over there. I pointed toward the eastern section of forest. Tom settled into the chair by the desk while the rangers remained standing, alert. Walk us through exactly what happened, David. Everything you saw, heard, did. I recounted the events as precisely as I could, waking to Sarah's voice, the creature's distorted appearance, the things it said, how I shot it, the black fluid instead of blood, the inhuman shriek it made, and the hours of voices circling the tower afterward. Tom and the rangers exchanged glances as I spoke. When I finished, Peterson whistled low. You're either the luckiest son of a bitch alive or the unluckiest, he said. Let's take a look at where this happened, Tom said, rising from the chair. David, you want to show us? Part of me wanted to refuse, to stay in the relative safety of the tower, but I knew they needed to see the evidence. I nodded, checked that the pistol was loaded, and led them down the stairs. In the daylight, the clearing looked harmless. Just grass, dirt, and scattered pine needles. I pointed to the spot where the creature had stood when I shot it. "There," I said. "That's where it was standing." Ramirez crouched down, examining the ground. After a moment, he called us over. "Look at this." Dark stains marked the earth, not red like blood, but black and viscous, with an oily sheen in the sunlight. The substance had soaked into the soil, leaving 3 distinct splotches about 2 feet apart. "That's where the bullets hit," I confirmed. Peterson took samples in small evidence vials while Ramirez photographed the stains. Tom stood beside me, his expression grim. "Have you seen this before?" I asked him. He nodded slowly. "Once, 7 years ago, another lookout shot at something he described similarly. We found stains like these, but we wrote it off as some kind of animal with a weird infection." "This isn't from any animal," Peterson muttered, capping a vial of the black substance. "Check the tree line," Tom directed. "David said it ran that way." The 4 of us approached the eastern edge of the forest cautiously, weapons ready. Just inside the tree line, Ramirez stopped suddenly. "Chief," he called to Tom, "you need to see this." A massive pine bore deep gouges in its trunk, about 7 feet up from the ground. The marks weren't like any animal claw pattern I'd seen. These were too uniform, too deliberate. 4 parallel slashes that had torn through bark and into the wood beneath. "Jesus," Tom breathed. "There's more," Peterson called from 20 feet deeper into the forest. He pointed to another tree with similar markings, then to dark splotches on the ground and underbrush. "It's leaving a trail," Ramirez said. "We could track it." Tom shook his head firmly. "Not today. Not without more men and better equipment." We found 3 more marked trees, each with the same pattern of slashes, always at the same height. Too high for a bear, too uniform for random damage. The black stains continued in a rough line heading northeast toward the river I'd visited days ago. "It's marking territory," Tom said as we returned to the clearing. "Warning us away." Back in the tower, the Rangers set up a portable radio system, establishing contact with their headquarters. Tom pulled me aside while they reported their findings. "David," he said quietly, "you've got more than enough reason to get out of here. We can have you down the mountain today. Full pay for the season, excellent recommendations." I looked out the window at the forest stretching endlessly in all directions. Somewhere out there, the creature was waiting, watching, possibly healing from the wounds I'd inflicted. "No one would blame you," Tom continued. "Not after what you've seen, what you've been through." Peterson overheard and joined us. "He's right, Miller. I've been with the service 15 years, and I've never seen anything like those marks or that black stuff. Whatever you shot isn't in any wildlife manual. We've had 4 other lookouts request emergency transfers in the past decade after reporting experiences similar to yours," Ramirez added, "though none of them actually saw the thing like you did, just heard voices." "What happened to them? The lookouts who left?" I asked. Tom shrugged. "Most of them quit the service entirely. One's in therapy. Another moved to Arizona, said he never wanted to see another pine forest as long as he lived." "And Sam Wilson killed himself," I added. "Yes," Tom acknowledged, "after his partner was killed." I walked to the desk and picked up Sam's journal, the one containing his final entries. "He didn't just kill himself, Tom. He killed himself to protect others, to prevent the creature from using his voice to lure new victims." The tower fell silent as the weight of my words sank in. "So," Tom finally said, "what's it going to be, David? There's a seat in the Jeep with your name on it. We can have you back to civilization by nightfall." I looked around the small tower that had been my home for less than a week. The place I'd sought out for isolation now felt like a trap, a hunting ground for something I couldn't fully comprehend. Logic screamed at me to leave, to run as far and as fast as I could, but something else, pride, stubbornness, or maybe just sheer defiance, kept me rooted in place. "I'm staying," I said. the words surprising me as much as everyone else. "David," Tom began. "I signed a contract," I cut him off. 3 months as fire lookout at Tower 4. I'm honoring that commitment. Peterson and Ramirez exchanged glances. "You sure about this?" Peterson asked. "That thing will come back, you know." "I know," I said, feeling strangely calm. "But now I know what I'm dealing with, and it knows I can hurt it." Tom studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Your choice. But we're upgrading your equipment before we leave." Over the next 2 hours, the Rangers installed a more powerful radio system with backup batteries, motion sensors around the perimeter of the clearing, and a solar-powered spotlight that could illuminate the entire area around the tower base. They left me with additional ammunition for the pistol and a shotgun with shells. "Aim for center mass," Ramirez instructed. "Don't try for headshots, especially in low light. And remember, it bleeds. Anything that bleeds can die." As they prepared to leave, Tom took me aside one final time. "The creature stays within about 5 miles of the tower complex," he explained. "We've tracked incidents over the years, mapped them. It seems territorial, focused on this particular area." "Why here?" I asked. Tom shook his head. "No idea. Maybe it's been here all along. Maybe these mountains belong to it more than they do to us." "You said it retreats when threatened." "Seems to. After violent encounters like what happened with Mark or with you last night, it goes quiet for a while. Licks its wounds, maybe. But it always comes back." I nodded, absorbing this information. "How many people has it killed?" Tom's expression darkened. "That we know of for certain? 3 in the past decade. Mark Roberts was the most recent. But there have been hikers who went missing in this area over the years. Cases that were never solved. Peterson called from outside that they were ready to go." Tom extended his hand. "This is your last chance to change your mind, David." I shook his hand firmly. "I'll see you at the 8 o'clock check-in tomorrow morning." The 3 men departed, their vehicles kicking up dust as they drove away. I watched until they disappeared from view, then turned back to the empty tower. Alone again, but different this time. I had better equipment, more weapons, and most importantly, knowledge. I knew what was hunting me. I knew it could be hurt. I knew its patterns, its methods. I moved to the desk and opened my logbook, recording everything that had happened since my last entry. The encounter with the creature, the evidence we'd found, and my decision to stay. Writing it down made it real, tangible, something I could face. Outside, the forest stretched quiet and beautiful in the afternoon sun. Somewhere out there, the creature was watching, perhaps nursing the wounds I'd inflicted, planning its next move. But so was I. I didn't see the creature again for 3 days after Tom and the Rangers left. The forest remained quiet, almost peaceful, as if nothing had ever happened. But I knew better. The black stains in the clearing had dried to a crusty residue, and the claw marks on the trees remained visible reminders that I wasn't alone. On the 4th night, it returned. I was completing my midnight scan when Sarah's voice drifted up from below the tower. "David, are you still awake up there?" I set down my binoculars and picked up the pistol. The voice was nearly perfect. Her inflections, her slight southern accent that emerged when she was tired. But there was something hollow about it, like hearing a recording played through a tunnel. "I know what you are," I called out, keeping away from the windows. "And I know you're not her." A pause. Then, "Don't be ridiculous, David. It's really me this time. I drove all night to find you." I checked the motion sensors the Rangers had installed. 2 of them were flashing red. The eastern and southern perimeters had been breached. I turned on the spotlight, flooding the clearing with harsh white light. Nothing was visible below, but the sensors continued flashing. Something was out there, moving just beyond the reach of the light. "The Rangers told me what happened," the voice continued. now coming from a different direction. About your hallucinations. They're worried about you, babe. They think you're having some kind of breakdown. I loaded the shotgun and placed it beside the pistol on the desk. You made a mistake, I called out. The Rangers wouldn't have told Sarah anything. They don't even know who she is. Another pause, longer this time. When the voice returned, it had changed. Not Sarah anymore, but my mother's voice, dead for over a decade. Davy, honey, is that you up there? I've been looking everywhere for you. My chest tightened. The voice was perfect. The slight raspiness from years of smoking. The way she always stretched out the second syllable of everywhere. You can't have her voice, I said, my own voice shaking despite my resolve. You never met her. She died before you started hunting in these woods. A low, grinding sound rose from the forest edge, like metal being twisted apart. Then silence fell again, heavy and complete. The motion sensors stopped flashing around 3 a.m. I didn't sleep. That night established the pattern for the weeks that followed. The creature would return every few days, testing new voices, new approaches. It was learning, adapting, refining its strategy. It tried using childhood friends' voices, old co-workers, even distant relatives I barely remembered. Each time it got something slightly wrong, using phrases the real person would never say, or referencing events incorrectly. But with each attempt, the mistakes grew smaller, harder to detect. Sarah remained its favorite weapon. It knew her voice hurt me the most. You're running away again, it called one night in her voice, just like you always do when things get hard. Remember when my dad died? You couldn't even look me in the eye for weeks. The creature had plucked that detail from my own thoughts, my own guilt. I'd never told anyone how I'd failed Sarah during her grief. Tom checked in daily on the radio, becoming my anchor to reality. You're doing better than anyone expected, he told me during our 2-week mark call. Most people would have broken by now. I'm not most people, I replied, though exhaustion weighed my words. No, you're not, Tom agreed. Listen, I've arranged something. Stand by. The radio clicked and hissed, then a new voice came through. Another fire lookout from a tower 50 miles south. This is Juanita at Tower 11. Tom says you could use some company on the airwaves. The conversation was brief, just 15 minutes about weather patterns and a family of hawks nesting near her tower. But hearing another human voice, a real one, felt like drinking water after days in the desert. Tom arranged more calls like this, patching me through to other lookouts across the region. These conversations, mundane as they were, kept me tethered to the normal world. By the 3rd week, I'd established a new routine. I slept during daylight hours, when the creature never appeared. From noon to 6, I'd pull the curtains tight, place the gun beside my pillow, and collapse into exhausted sleep. Evenings were for standard fire watch duties, scanning the horizon, logging weather conditions, reporting to base. The creature rarely appeared before midnight, seeming to prefer the deepest dark. Nights were for vigilance. I'd position myself away from the windows, shotgun across my lap, and wait. Sometimes the creature would call for hours without stopping. Other nights, it would simply watch from the tree line, a tall shadow that vanished when I turned the spotlight on it. I fired warning shots when it approached too close to the tower. The first time, I blasted the shotgun into the air when a twisted, elongated figure began climbing the stairs. The creature retreated instantly, disappearing into the forest with that same metallic shriek I'd heard the first night. The shots bought me reprieve, usually 3 or 4 days of silence before it returned. You've wounded it twice now, Tom said during our 1-month call. That's unprecedented. Not enough to kill it, I replied, watching the forest through my binoculars. The afternoon sun cast long shadows between the trees, perfect hiding places. Maybe not, but you've changed the rules of engagement. It's used to being the hunter, not the hunted. I laughed without humor. I'm hardly hunting it, Tom. I'm just trying to stay alive. Same difference to this thing. No one's ever fought back effectively before. After that conversation, I started keeping more detailed notes about the creature's behaviors and patterns. When it appeared, what voices it used, how it responded to threats. The analytical approach gave me purpose beyond mere survival. I noticed it preferred moonless nights for its most aggressive approaches. It avoided the motion sensors after I shot at it the third time, having apparently learned the connection between the flashing lights and my response. Its mimicry grew more sophisticated, longer conversations, more accurate emotional manipulation. "I'm worried about you," Sarah's voice called one night in early August. "You haven't been sleeping, have you? I can help with that. Just come down and talk to me." The real Sarah wouldn't care if I never slept again, I called back, my finger on the trigger of the shotgun. She made that pretty clear when she walked out. "People change, David. I've changed. Give me a chance to show you." I fired a warning shot into the air. The creature retreated, but I could hear branches breaking as it moved through the underbrush, no longer bothering with stealth. 6 weeks in, something changed. The creature became more erratic, less methodical. Some nights it would scream for hours in multiple voices simultaneously, a horrific chorus of Sarah, my mother, Tom, and other voices I couldn't identify. Other nights, complete silence. But the motion sensors would still trigger, revealing its presence even when it chose not to speak. "It's frustrated," Tom suggested during our check-in. "You're not playing by its rules." "What are its rules?" "Based on previous incidents? You're supposed to be broken by now, lured outside, or driven to do what Sam did." I examined the tower that had become both my prison and my fortress. The walls were covered with my notes and observations. Empty food cans lined the shelves. I'd gone through nearly half my supplies. My reflection in the small mirror showed a gaunt face with a beard I'd stopped bothering to trim. "Maybe I am broken," I said, "just not in the way it wants." "There's a difference between bent and broken, kid. You're still standing." On the 50th night, I woke to Sarah's voice directly outside my window. "I know you're awake, David. I can see you." I remained perfectly still in my bed, pistol already in hand. The voice was coming from too high up, at window level, 80 feet above the ground. "What did you think?" she continued. "That I'd just give up? That I'd leave you alone?" I shifted my eyes toward the window without moving my head. A shadow darkened the glass, something clinging to the outside of the tower. "You shot me, David. That wasn't very nice." I rose slowly, keeping the gun aimed at the window. The silhouette against the glass was unmistakably not human, too tall, too thin, limbs bent at impossible angles. "But I forgive you," Sarah's voice continued from the twisted shape. "That's what love is, right? Forgiveness. Remember when you forgot our anniversary, and I forgave you?" I stepped closer to the window, close enough to make out details through the glass. The creature clung to the outside wall with elongated fingers, its body stretched impossibly thin. The face was a hollow mockery of human features, just indentations where eyes should be, a gash for a mouth. "You're getting better at pretending," I said, raising the pistol, "but you still can't get it right." "What do you mean?" Sarah's voice asked, the lipless mouth moving in terrible synchronization with the words. Sarah never forgave me for forgetting our anniversary. She held it against me for months. I fired through the window. The glass shattered as the bullet struck the creature in its mockery of a face. It released its grip on the tower, falling backward with that now familiar metallic shriek. I heard it hit the ground with a heavy thud, then the sound of something large dragging itself into the forest. I radioed Tom immediately, reporting what had happened. Rangers arrived the next morning to replace the broken window and search the area below. They found more of the black substance staining the ground and deep furrows where the creature had pulled itself away. "You hit it good this time," Peterson said, collecting samples of the fluid. "Right in the face." "Will it die?" I asked. Peterson exchanged glances with his partner. "Honestly, we don't know. Nothing like this has happened before." The creature disappeared for nearly 2 weeks after that. The forest fell quiet in a way that was almost more unnerving than the nightly visits had been. I maintained my vigilance, convinced this was just another strategy, waiting for me to lower my guard. When it finally returned, it stayed at the forest edge, no longer attempting to approach the tower. No more voices calling up to me, no more climbing the walls or stairs. Just a tall, thin shadow moving between the trees, watching. "It's scared of you now," Tom said during our check-in. "You've heard it multiple times. Changed the equation. Or it's planning something new," I countered. "Maybe. But take the win, David. You've done something no one else has managed." I wasn't sure if scaring a supernatural entity counted as a win, but I allowed myself a small measure of pride. I was still here, still sane, still fighting. As August turned to September, the nights grew cooler and slightly shorter. The creature maintained its distance, appearing only at the forest edge, watching but never approaching. I continued my fire watch duties diligently, spotting and reporting 3 small fires started by lightning strikes. The rangers who came to investigate them brought me fresh supplies and news from the outside world. "Almost to the finish line," Tom reminded me during our 8-week call. "Season ends in 3 weeks. You've made it further than anyone thought possible." I looked out at the forest, beautiful and terrible in its vastness. I still don't understand what it wants, why it hunts people here. "Some things aren't meant to be understood," Tom replied. "Just survived." That night, as I completed my final scan before trying to sleep, I noticed something different at the forest edge. The creature stood in its usual spot, still and watching, but for the first time it wasn't alone. A second figure stood beside it, similar in its wrong proportions and elongated limbs, but smaller, as if newer, less fully formed. I radioed Tom immediately. "There are 2 of them now." His silence on the other end lasted several seconds. "Are you sure?" "Positive. I'm looking at them right now." "Christ," Tom whispered. "It's never done that before." I watched as the 2 figures remained motionless at the tree line, their hollow faces turned toward my tower. Dawn was still hours away. "What does it mean?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "I don't know," Tom said. "But whatever you do, don't let your guard down. Not even for a second." Tom's pickup truck appeared on the winding access road on a crisp, late September morning. I watched it climb toward the tower through my binoculars, tracking its slow progress around each switchback. The first snow of the season had dusted the highest peaks overnight, a white frosting against the blue sky that marked the changing season as clearly as any calendar. I gathered my logbook and the small bag of personal items I'd kept separate from the seasonal equipment. Most of my clothes hung loose on my frame now. I'd lost at least 20 pounds over the summer, my body burning through reserves during sleepless nights and constant vigilance. My beard had grown thick and wild, and the face that looked back from my small mirror belonged to someone older than the person who had arrived 3 months ago. The creature hadn't shown itself for over a week. As temperatures dropped and nights lengthened, it had retreated deeper into the forest. Its last appearance had been a brief sighting at the tree line, just the taller figure standing motionless for about 20 minutes before melting back into the darkness. Tom stepped out of his truck and looked up at the tower, shielding his eyes against the morning sun. I raised my hand in greeting from the observation deck. He returned the gesture, then began unloading winterization supplies from the truck bed. I descended the wooden stairs for the last time, each step creaking a familiar farewell. Tom watched my approach with an appraising eye. "You made it," he said simply, extending his hand. I took it, noting the genuine respect in his weathered face. I did. Full season. First one in over 5 years. He shook his head slightly. Didn't think anyone could do it. Not with what's out there. Neither did I some nights. I helped him unload the truck, lifting plastic sheets and containers of antifreeze. We spent the morning working through the shutdown checklist. I drained the water barrel while Tom disconnected the solar panels. We emptied the propane lines, covered the fire finder with a protective tarp, and sealed the windows with plastic sheeting to prevent snow from building up against the glass. The work felt good. Normal, practical tasks that had nothing to do with supernatural entities or survival. My muscles ached with the effort after weeks of tension and limited movement. The Rangers analyzed those samples, Tom said as we secured the floor hatch. The black fluid from the creature. Lab couldn't identify it. Said it wasn't blood, wasn't oil, wasn't anything they could classify. I'm not surprised. I taped down the edge of a plastic sheet. Nothing about that thing fits into normal categories. Tom nodded, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the cool air. They want to send a research team up here next spring. Scientists, not just Rangers. Will you let them? Not my call. Higher-ups are interested now that we have physical evidence. He paused, though I'm not sure what good it'll do. That thing's been here longer than any of us. Probably be here long after we're gone. We broke for lunch around noon, sitting on the observation deck with sandwiches Tom had brought. The forest stretched out before us, brilliant with early autumn colors, orange, yellow, and red painted across the canopy of evergreens. So, Tom said, brushing crumbs from his beard, have you thought about next season? I studied the tree line where I'd last seen the creature. You still need lookouts? Always, especially ones who can handle special circumstances. He cleared his throat. Pay would be better. Hazard bonus, substantially better. I nodded, having already made my decision days ago. I'll come back. Tom looked surprised, though he tried to hide it. Just like that? After everything that happened? With one condition. I turned to face him directly. I want to bring a partner next time. His eyebrows rose. You want to expose someone else to this? After what happened to Mark? To Sam? Isolation is what makes us vulnerable, I explained, gesturing toward the surrounding forest. That thing, whatever it is, it preys on people who are alone. It separates them, isolates them, then breaks them down. It uses voices of loved ones because there's no one else around to contradict the deception. Tom considered this, looking thoughtful. You think having 2 people would disrupt its hunting pattern? I do. Sam and Mark were targeted separately. The creature lured Mark away when Sam wasn't around. It waited until they were divided. I leaned forward. 2 people, always together, always watching each other's backs. That changes the equation. And who would you bring? Someone who'd believe all this? He gestured vaguely at the forest. Not many people would take this assignment, even with a warning. I had already considered this problem. My cousin Jake, Army veteran, 2 tours in Afghanistan. He's been looking for seasonal work since he got back. He'd believe me, and he knows how to handle himself. Tom rubbed his chin, considering. I'd need to get approval. It's not standard procedure to have 2 lookouts in one tower. Neither is arming them with pistols and shotguns, I pointed out. A small smile cracked his serious expression. Fair point. He extended his hand again. I'll make it happen, but make damn sure your cousin understands what he's signing up for. I will. We finished the winterization process by mid-afternoon. I took one final walk around the tower that had been my home and battlefield for 3 months, checking each window, each corner. The bullet hole where I'd shot the creature remained in the replaced glass, a small imperfection the repair crew hadn't bothered to fix. I packed my journals, including Sam's, into my backpack. The official logbooks would remain, but the personal records of my encounter were coming with me. evidence, if I ever needed it. Tom locked the tower behind us and handed me the key, a symbolic gesture since I would be returning in the spring. We loaded the last of the supplies into his truck and climbed in. The engine roared to life, echoing across the clearing. As we drove down the winding road, I turned to look back through the rear window. The tower stood tall against the sky, its windows reflecting the afternoon sunlight like blank eyes. Then I saw it. A tall, thin figure standing at the forest edge. It remained perfectly still, its elongated form unmistakable even at this distance. I blinked, and when my eyes refocused, the tree line was empty. "Everything all right?" Tom asked, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. I turned back around, settling into my seat. "Yeah, just saying goodbye for now." The truck rounded a bend and the tower disappeared from view. The forest enclosed the road on both sides, branches reaching toward each other overhead like fingers almost touching. Soon we would be back in civilization, cell phones, internet, crowds of people, and the comforting hum of human activity. But part of me remained in that tower, watching the tree line. And I knew with absolute certainty that something was still there, watching back, waiting for the snow to melt and spring to arrive, waiting for my return. I was coming back, but next time I wouldn't be alone.